Hi everyone, hope everyone is doing well. I just want to start off by mentioning that I'm sorry if you guys hear noises in the background. It's coming outside of my window from my neighbors, so I'm sorry if you hear a couple of loud noises through this. So I did my project on how and why women were targeted for witchcraft in Europe. In Europe and America, between 1570 and 1680, between 71 and 92% of the people that were executed for witchcraft were women. I found that information from the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, which I find really interesting to read. So if you guys think about checking that out, I would recommend it. Women having power were feared by men in the past. So say a man had a power over women, which they did back then. If a woman was finding some power in witchcraft, that scared men because they have always been more powerful than women had, and that was what they had power over, was their wives, their children, things like that, other women in the community. Women were thought to be more naive and gullible than men in the past. They were thought to be less than equal than men, and they weren't, even though they were probably just as smart as the men, they weren't thought to be as smart because they just stayed home, took care of the children, cooked and cleaned. This quote I got from the Malleus, they are more credulous, and since the chief aim of the devil is to corrupt faith, therefore he rather attacks them. What he means by that is the devil would rather corrupt women for witchcraft and get them to follow the devil and take them away from their God, because they thought it would be more easy and they would be more gullible to believe that the devil will do what they want if they would follow the devil. So reasons a woman may have been accused. Affairs was a big one throughout our readings and stuff. I had learned affairs like if the man had found out that his wife was cheating on him, he would, he'd just be mad and accuse her of witchcraft, whether that was true or not. That was just a way of enacting revenge on the wife, or it could be the other way around. The man was cheating on a wife, and the man would accuse his mistress of putting him under a love spell or bewitching him, stuff like that. That was a very common one I had read in a lot of the stories. Not being able to have children. If a woman isn't able to have children, some of them would accuse other women that they weren't necessarily on good terms with, of maybe cursing them to not be able to have children, things like that. A man or husband being impotent. So if a man, couldn't get it up, then he would blame a female for not being able to do that. Gossip, that was a really big one. It goes back to the rapport situation. Women would talk about each other, and if they would get mad, a lot of the time they would gossip about things. If they heard something like, oh, someone next door is doing this with magic, or he saw her going to the Sabbath, things like that. If a woman is caught acting out of the norm, what I meant by that is if she wasn't acting how she was supposed to, if she wasn't doing what a woman was supposed to do during the time, if she wasn't doing what her husband was telling her, which going against what a man has told them, because women were supposed to be ladylike, they were supposed to be quiet, they were supposed to do what men told them to do, they were supposed to be very submissive towards men. So a couple of stories that I had brought, that I had gotten from 2 books that I thought were interesting. These are examples of 2 women that were accused of witchcraft. The first one is Gwen. She was a 40-year-old woman from Wales, and she was being tried for witchcraft in 1594. She was a woman that was known by many people as someone who would help those in need with her charms, which in the book, if you had read it, she learned it from, I believe, her older sister. The evidence against her were from people who had said she had acted in revenge against them and their family. So Gwen had some men enter her house, and she was kind of forced to give them drinks, and she was pushed and manhandled by one of them, and later his arm had been broken with the same one that he had pushed her with. Another man that was also unfriendly to Gwen from the same time as the other one found his wife was getting ill and eventually lost her arms and legs, which he thought was an act of revenge against him and his wife to make him suffer. Gwen was slapped by a man's brother who her husband worked for. The young man became crazy and died the same day. So he fell into madness, they said, and the mother of the young man had said that Gwen had told her that he would die that day because of revenge, because he had slapped her. Gwen was eventually found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. I thought this was interesting because even though a lot of people were known her as someone who would fix sick people, help them in many ways if they needed help. She was just known as a good person by many people, but because these men had done her wrong and then bad things happened to them, they automatically kind of took advantage of her already having suspicion against her and made it clear that, to the jury at least, that she was a witch. So they took advantage of the stories and whether they were true or not. And then I found that from the book called Accused. It has a bunch of different stories of witchcraft trials that I found interesting. Elizabeth Sawyer, a woman living in Edmonton in 1621, was put on trial for witchcraft. I read that in the Witchcraft Sourcebook by Levesque. Rumors from the neighbors around Elizabeth began the suspicions of her working with the devil. Many of the suspicions that they had were because of her looks, because she was kind of deformed. They said that she had a spiraled spine. She was pale, so she was deformed. She probably had a disability. She was very poor, the book said. So she was probably malnourished. So even though it was probably environmental reasons why she looked the way she looked, they assumed it was the devil, and that she was a witch, and that's why she looked the way she looked. So that kind of goes back to the hag version of the witch, even though that this one, she's a 40-year-old woman that looks completely normal. Elizabeth would swear and blasphemize, which was another big reason. People would think that she was working with the devil and practiced witchcraft, because women were supposed to be quiet and timid. They weren't supposed to swear. They were supposed to be ladylike, so she didn't act in the way that she should have been, going back to the not doing as she was told and being out of the norm. Neighbors believed that she was to blame for children and cattle dying. It said that the neighbors were not on good terms with her, and that they had already had some quarrels with her, so they believed that she enacted revenge against them by killing children and the cattle, causing a lot of problems in the community. Some people believe she did not have a fear of God in her heart and that the devil was with her. So during her trial, they had three other women go and look for like kind of a devil's mark, and they had found this little bump that they thought that the devil was suckling off of, and they had asked her questions about it, and she had answered, but it didn't say whether or not she was being tortured to get those answers. Elizabeth was questioned and was found guilty of witchcraft. Female witches in art. So some of the things we've talked about in class were like in art you can see a lot of different themes when it comes to, like, you can always know they're witches if they're nude, if their breasts were showing, if they weren't wearing what a woman should be wearing, if they were doing things out of the norm. So in this picture you can see it's nighttime, which is a big theme. These are all women surrounding this goat, which is supposed to be, the devil or Satan, and then they're giving children to him. So they're sacrificing children. You can see a dead child right here. There's little babies up here, which is sad. But yeah, this is supposed to be, I would assume, the Sabbath, or them sacrificing what they needed to the devil. So the hair down and flowing, this one is their hair showing while the other three aren't showing. This is kind of an example of that, and I have more in the next slide. But right here you can see that there's a skull at the feet. There's this kind of like face right here. It's hard to tell exactly what it is. And then there's these symbols up here. It's just, this is kind of like 4 witches that look like they're getting ready to go to a Sabbath, or they're doing a ritual and whatnot. Other examples are naked bodies, dancing for a Sabbath, kissing the devil's behind, making potions in a cauldron, throwing liquid in the air, which is often to make rain, riding a goat or broomstick backwards, or sacrificing babies or animals. So this is two more examples of that. These are two witches that are with a cauldron, and then another witch right here. You can see that there's two snakes. It's kind of hard to tell, and a frog that they're holding with some kind of tool. They're making a potion or something to do spells, whatever they were doing. There's skulls down here. I've noticed that a lot of skulls are in the themes of this. And then in this one, you can see that the women's hair are down and flowing, and like their breasts are showing. There's a familiar right here with the witches, lots of naked women around. This one's riding a broom, this one's riding a goat, and that kind of stuff. And it's a lot of sexualization in the photos and pictures and depictions that you will see in witchcraft. Thank you for watching.